symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Dark Side of the Podcast. And of course, we couldn't do it without the creators of this fantastic series, Dark Side of the Ring. It airs on Vice every Thursday night, and you don't want to miss it. And when you're watching it, we hope you're thinking about Evan and Jason. Guys, how are you?
Good. Man.
What's going on?
Man, I'm excited to be here. Of course, last night you did a little shock and awe on Vice. We showed Deathmatch Wrestling probably for the first time on a mainstream station like this, and it was probably exposure to a whole new side of professional wrestling to a lot of fans. And it's really the primary topic today. I mean, obviously, you can't tell the story of Nick Gage and MDK all effing day without talking about Deathmatch Wrestling. I'm curious from your standpoint, Jason, when was this a topic that was sort of on your radar? Were you familiar with Nick Gage or his story? Were you a fan of Deathmatch Wrestling? Just catch me up about how this came to be an episode.
Yeah, I guess to start off, like I do have to say, like I wasn't a fan of Deathmatch Wrestling per se. It's just, even though I also make horror films that are super gory and very violent, but in real life, as Evan would know, I am super squeamish when it comes to blood or any sort of trauma on the human body. So it's always been something I've had to, like, when I see it, I'm like watching it like through my fingers, because it's like it can be too much for me. But the first time I think like Nick Gage came across my radar is when Evan and I were at WrestleMania. What was it, 34?
I can't
2018
remember.
In New Orleans.
Yeah,
and we were filming some of the show there as well. And I think it was like the night before WrestleMania or 2 nights before, Joey Janela puts on this event called Spring Break, I believe.
Yep.
And we went to it, and we were, in the audience. And then all of a sudden this guy comes out, Nick Gage, and the pop he gets from the crowd was insane. Like, and I had never really quite heard of him before that. So, I was like looking at Evan, like, who is this guy? Like, everyone here like loves him. Like, he's over as you can be, And the last time I had seen something like that was when we were in Montreal, like a few years before doing Dark Side of the Ring. And we saw, was it Lincoln Steen at the, what were those, I forget what that.
Oh no, we saw Kevin Steen at the,
Kevin Steen. Sorry, yeah.
At the Battle War, and that was his last indie match before going to NXT.
Yeah,
and people were just losing their fucking minds.
Yeah, it was a similar experience where we didn't really know who that guy was, and then the crowd was just like, the community was just all about him and supporting. Just like engaged. It was the same thing for me. It was like, whoa, people here love this guy like so much. What's his story? So, and then it was pitched as, an episode for Dark Side of the Ring. And then that's when we started doing research. I started to learn more about like the history of him and his life.
Yeah. And I actually remember being at that spring break, and it was, it was Nick Gage coming out. That was like, whoa, who is this guy? Because it was somebody that everybody else knew except for me. And then that was also the year that PCO and Walter had that match. Just shout out to that match, because that match was fucking insane.
It was amazing.
That was like PCO's kind of coming out party again, and that was just brutality, and that was amazing. So that really opened my eyes to kind of this new vibrant indie scene that I just was not really privy to at all. I mean, I was there for WrestleMania, and that show was definitely 10 times more entertaining than the WrestleMania show. But anyway, it was right around the time we were talking about for season 3, which episodes we were going to cover. And I think, Conrad, you even threw Nick Gage's name, out there as a story we should look into. And we had sort of seen other people talk about it. And then it's like, I do remember the David Arquette thing. Definitely got to talk about that, because that definitely made the rounds in the mainstream of like, oh my God, this guy almost killed David Arquette, and I remember seeing that and be like, whoa, what is this? This is insane. This is one of the more insane match moments of all time. And then it was just really getting into, like, once we looked into the story, of Nick Gage, and it's not just like, if you're doing a show, Dark Side of the Ring, and you're looking at sort of, some of the more, disturbing and troubling stories and in this world. I mean, deathmatch wrestling definitely fits into that mold because it is such a, for me, again, I wasn't a fan of it. I mean, I'm a fan of hardcore wrestling. I like, I grew up with ECW and things like that, but deathmatch takes it to a whole new level of, pulling shit out of people's heads and, syringes and crazy shit. It's insane, but I think from a psychological point of view, it's very thematically fitting for us to look at because it's not only just about like what would provoke a performer to want to be a part of this, but what also is it about the audience that wants to see this too? Because for me, I'm with Jason. I when I first saw the first cuts of this episode, before our standards and practices folks got a hold of it, I mean, I just watched a snuff film. I was totally, completely like, all color had drained from my body, watching this because I just can't handle it.
I was screaming at the screen. It was like the first time working on the show. Maybe there was another time, like when I saw like Jim Cornette like break his legs and that. It's like another moment where I screamed when I first saw that footage. But yeah, all through the first cut of the Nick Gage episode, I was just screaming and
because that. Yeah, I know we're bouncing around, but that whole tournament of death scene in the episode from last night, that in its first form in the episode, like the very first cut we had of it, it's 10 times more grisly than what we're showing on screen there. And so that to me was just like whoa. And but aside from the deathmatch side of everything, Nick Gage's story to me fits the bill because here is a portrait of a guy who's been through a lot, obviously going through robbing a bank, it's jail time, but also struggles with addiction. And I think addiction became a big theme for this episode because that we always try and find that universal theme or that element, and with Nick's story it's very strong. And so we didn't just want it to be about deathmatch wrestling, we wanted it to be all about that. And so then it just seemed like a no-brainer for us.
A lot to unpack there. But
yeah,
I do have to follow up because, and boy, I hate this, but how was this gross and all the shit you saw Mick Foley not?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Mick because I do think that Mick Foley is sort of the gateway drug into this. And one thing,
the guy that was inspired by, or the thing that inspired most of this, in my opinion, is the IWA King of the Deathmatch stuff from 95. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I know you guys were like me and like, what are we watching? And then the volume got turned up real big in 98 when he flies off the cage. And I'm not blaming any of this on Foley, but I'm just saying we as wrestling fans have played those clips over and over and over. But when we see other guys do it, now we're like, wait a minute, this is bad. And I'm just curious from you guys' standpoint, because I was a fan of deathmatch wrestling until I saw a bad accident in person, and then that changed my whole opinion. It's one thing when it's on my small screen or big screen, you know what I mean? It's another thing when you're there and you're like, oh, this guy's really hurt and I'm in the same room with him. So that changed it for me. But from you guys' standpoint, how did you reconcile when Foley does it, it's cool, but when these guys do it, oh my God.
Well, on that note, just because I think it's related to a point I wanted to make about this episode, about Foley and that stuff, because I think that was the big exposure point for America. That's the major cultural touch point in wrestling. And, obviously you hear a lot about deathmatch wrestling isn't wrestling and blah, 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 and that's a whole nother just, thing pack. But for me, it's like where deathmatch wrestling is an evolution of all of that. It's kind of now where all that stuff would go. I always, when we're going to be talking about this later on, this season with FMW and things like that, because you could trace back hardcore wrestling and deathmatch, I'm sure way back into the, beginning of time with wrestling, but also there's that, Tupelo concession stand brawl and, 1981, which would give way to Onita and to FMW. And then you have ECW and then Mick Foley, and all of that's just kind of this evolution, I think. But something I think there was a planetary alignment moment, I think, culturally in the late 90s, specifically with Mick Foley. not to blame him, you know. But like, you know, I think yes, the IWA thing, but I think the King of the Ring, Hell in the Cell, Mick Foley, Undertaker, that whole thing that left such an impression on me. I mean, I know it did for you too, Jason. But
millions of people.
That is, you know, that is the almost unforgettable. You'd never seen anything like it before. But that was in 1998, and I feel like at that time in this country, you have to think about what was popular, you know, and it was like Jackass, you know, was like a thing, and like when a lot of people saw that, there was this innate feeling, and we talk about it in the episode of I want to do that, and I need to emulate that, and need to be a part of it, and I'm going to get my. And I think there was a subsect of fans who busted out their trampolines, you know, went to the hardware store, you know, bought the cookie sheets to hit each other over the head with, and all this shit, and then did all of that and reenacted it, and I think that is that sort of like late 90s mentality of like, I'm going to do that. I want to be a part of it. I think fused its way into now what we have with deathmatch wrestling. And now it is that sort of millennial generation of people doing that because they grew up on it with Mick Foley. That's where they were exposed to it. And then it was this part of like, I need to enact it and be a part of it. And like, yes, that's what I need to show like how tough I am and I can endure it. And I think that was a part of the Jackass thing too in the late 90s is like, these guys are doing all this crazy shit. Now I got to endure all this goofy torment, you know, and I think that is part of like that's like a phenomenon. I think a cultural phenomenon. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen The Backyard. Have you ever seen that documentary?
I haven't.
Oh,
it's like a low budget snuff film, basically, about these kids in America. I think it's early 2000s, and it's a portrait of different backyard wrestling promotions.
Oh wait, I did see this. Yeah, I did see.
Oh, and it opens with a scene with these two guys who are brothers who are having a hardcore death match in their backyard in front of no one. There's not a single audience member, and mom is filming it. Mom is the camera person.
Yeah.
And like that is, I mean, that's a psychological experiment you can unpack for days. Yeah.
Another one of my all-time favorite moments is in that documentary is when because the kid he's got a collection of wrestling action figures on the wall, and he's just like, I just want to buy my own guy. $5.99.
He's just daydreaming.
Yeah,
buy my own guy.
His figure will be on the wall someday.
Yeah, we all just want to buy our own guy.
I know. Yeah.
So, sorry. Going back to what we were saying, Mick Foley, how we reconcile it. Well, I mean, for me, it's just like I can't really reconcile it still because I can't watch it. You know.
Yeah.
So for me, it does cross a line for me. Personally, I mean, I've grown to be endeared by Nick Gage as a performer, and I mean his entrances, coming out to Metallica, you know, For Whom the Bell Tolls, coming out, getting people crazy, doing the promos. His promos are amazing. His cameos are amazing. All that stuff, I love it, you know. But the matches themselves sometimes are, it's hard for me to watch. So I can't reconcile it, but I do think that, you know, Mick Foley plays a role into that. And another funny thing on that is Nick Gage had told us about the time he met Mick Foley. There was a time where fan convention or whatever, there's Mick Foley. And of course, you know, Nick goes up to Mick and he's like, I just got to tell you that you're the best of all time. And, you know, I wouldn't be doing any of this shit if it weren't for you and, you know, whatever. And then he's like, you know, shaking his hand and Mick's response, of course, is just like, I'm sorry. You know, like, you know, because he feels so responsible, I think, in a lot of ways for what this is evolved into, you know, and how this has just taken on a new life, you know, in a lot of ways. But, you know, he is a huge player into why we know about this stuff today, I feel like.
Well, also, too, you know, Mick has paid the price. You know, Mick, you know, there's been documentaries out there and things like that where, you know, he struggles at times to put on socks. And that's not something you think about when you talk about a guy who, you know, despite what people may say about his physique, was a hell of an athlete. You can't do all of that stuff and not be athletic. And the punishment he took, though, has really taken a toll on him. So I'm sure when he meets a guy, he's like, I wonder if he knows what he's signing up for, because I'm sure some of those days where it's harder to get out of bed, he thinks, probably shouldn't have taken that flack back against Emil Mascaras back in the day or whatever, you know? So I understand how Foley maybe struggles with that. And I think, you know, the more I learn about wrestling through my little journey through all these podcasts, the more I appreciate that Foley is probably a guy who gets overlooked on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling because he literally did everything very well, whether it was promos or it was regular wrestling matches or hardcore matches or the different personas or general manager or commissioner or whatever it is. Like, it's just as far as a storyteller, he's top 5 for sure. And so,
oh my God. Yeah.
When you see a guy like, and I love Nick Gage. Let me say that. I had the pleasure of meeting Nick several years ago and had no idea he listens to my pods, but I'd been watching him since the CZW days and knew the whole story. And I thought, wait a minute, this guy listens to my pods? And so we got to talk about that, and we had him at StarCast, and he was great, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So people have a different perception of who he really is based on his character, and that means he's doing a good job at it, by the way. But there is a lot of criticism out there about, what Nick Gage does, that's not real wrestling, whatever the hell that means. But when he comes through the curtain and you see the reaction from the fans, that is wrestling. There is a connection between him and his fans that is undeniable. And so, you could argue about his headlock takeover. Okay, who cares? But when it comes to wrestling as a whole, it's about creating that connection, selling tickets, and Nick Gage gets that in spades, does he not?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, he has that connection, and and it's hard to find kind of another indie kind of wrestler that really gets that kind of a response. Or, I mean, yesterday on social media too, I think was kind of exemplary of that too, where just everyone's sharing these Nick Gage stories, this Nick Gage encounters, and so many of them are so positive, and that was cool too. But I think that for most viewers who were turned off by this episode, I mean, obviously before watching it, which is, it does mirror my sort of experience before making it a little bit, to be honest, was sort of like I understand the kind of like hesitancy with deathmatch wrestling or being turned off by it. Like I do get that. Yeah. But I think after we made this episode and just sort of seeing what Nick Gage was all about, I think there's a surface level interpretation of all the deathmatch stuff with wrestling fans. Like it is just that very simple, why would you do that? But I do think that there's a psychological, I keep going back to that. It is a very interesting, and that's what we tried to explore in the episode is, of the want to do this stuff and what brings the audience together to wanna. I don't really fully grasp that yet, but what wants to bring the audience together, like especially those tournament of death folks, and to watch and experience this. And I think that there's an addictive quality to that on both ends. I think that Jon Moxley talks about it in the episode. He talks about being addicted to that feeling of having half your blood gone and, drinking beers and smoking cigarettes after, and that exhilaration, the sort of afterglow of that like adrenaline rush, and I think that the wrestlers do get addicted to that adrenaline rush. And of course, we explore other stories in this season where wrestlers, they have to, after their in-ring days are over, they have to kind of, fill that void with something else, and that's really hard. And, but for me, the thing about this episode that was really what kept me going through the deathmatch stuff and having to cover my eyes and being like mortified of what I'm seeing is that human story of Nick and his struggles with addiction. Because, and that's something for me, like I haven't had my own personal experience with addiction, but a lot of times it gets overlooked, as something that like, oh, here's someone who's gone through a difficult time. And they have their vices and their addictions, but they get he's through rehab and he's fine now and everything's great. Now it's just not that simple, and this is something that is going to be a daily battle for somebody who goes through that. It's not something that's just it's over now. And I think Brett talks about that, and you can sort of see that in Nick's story that this is something he's going to have to deal with every day. And I think that too is a very relatable, universal thing that a lot of people, especially in this country and everywhere, are going through and can relate to. And I think that even on another, not to get super heady, but on another psychological layer, part of that addiction process is the self-destructive nature, towards yourself. I think that is a part of that. And I think when you marry that with what his profession is, I mean, whoa, that's heavy, of someone who battles that addiction, but now I gotta, tear myself open every night. That's wild. And to me, that's what then this became a very fascinating portrait of a person.
Jason, I want to ask you about the adrenaline thing, because I think Evan's right on that a lot of these guys do it for the adrenaline. And he sort of reminded us of what Moxley said of that feeling after a match. But in a weird way, I think some of that is just about, hey, I want to push the limits and let's see how close to the edge we can get and just sort of flirt with danger. But how is that different from someone who, and I'm asking you, Jason, someone who wants to bungee jump or jump out of an airplane? I mean, that's what we're about, right? We're getting to the edge of, hey, we're flirting with danger. This could go bad. And that's why it's exhilarating and that's why it's exciting. But we watch people bungee jump every day and we don't cross our arms and say, how dare they? But you know what I mean? Like
I'm just messing with
the idea. But even on a smaller level, professional football. And by the way, you'll not find a bigger football fan than me. But we're crushing our heads into each other over and over and over and over. And we're like, oh man, I can't wait to see the next play. And it doesn't. But with this, we're like, now why would they do that? And then it becomes almost a conversation of, well, how much did they get paid? As if that's any of your fucking business anyway. Like, that's just, I don't know. Evan, Jason, do you think that this adrenaline thing, and I mean, to me, that's really what this is. These guys want to sort of push the limits and feel that danger and come out okay most of the time. And, unless you have to be med flighted from a field, but
Yeah, I think there's like definitely an aspect where it's like, you're pushed, these guys are like pushing themselves, farther, like to the point where it's, I don't know, like it's just so, it's like an almost, I could see it and relate to it as in like a competition with yourself, or like in a competition with your peers as to like who is toughest, or you thought the last thing I did was tough. Well, I can go even tougher. Like, I don't know, I guess for me too, like I feel like I grew up around some people like Nick Gage, they're like, when he gets in the ring and like he talked about how he just like, he's like, I just served like 4.5 years in prison. And you know what? I was all right with it. It's just like this like toughness, that is like trying to go so far with it. Like I had a friend too, who was some kind of similar, who was really self-destructive, and he'd walk around like saying, I don't care if I go to jail, like all my friends are there anyways, he would just like say stuff like that. And like, it was like, he was always just trying to push himself to be like the toughest person. But then like really like deep inside, there's so much more going on. And then for me with Nick Gage, like I just connected with him being like, when you see him talk about his mom and you like see he's he's kind of like a mama's boy too, he's got like all this like love for his mom, and
he's a big heart. Yeah.
A big heart, and that's, I connected with that like so much. Cause that's like the show to like the extreme, there's this extreme of what he does to his body in the ring. And then it's like, you see this heart side of him, where, he loves his mom. He's also kind of like lost. He doesn't have his dad and his mom and his brother, his whole family are like gone. And so it's like it's almost like you get this feeling that he's seeing his fans as like a family. Like you see these things like we could have made a super montage of like all the awesome fan encounters that you see in that footage, like him going up to like, young kids and getting them like pumped up and stuff. Like, it's just, I don't know, there's something just so endearing about that. And, he is like giving his life for his art and for his fans. And it was also, super cool last night to see like so many fans saying that, like, I just saw myself on Dark Side of the Ring. Like they were in the audience in the footage, And I was even surprised by some people that I knew who never told me that like, I never knew that they were at some of these matches. And I saw their tweets saying like, I was there cool for this. And I was like, I saw that too. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's fun that you mentioned, because I do feel like the deathmatch fans, just passionate wrestling fans, period. We have like a little subscriber community that you guys have both met, the adfreeshows.com. And those folks, they know, like, and trust each other, and they talk every day. And it's not just about our content, it's about real life stuff. And I think that's one of the great things about wrestling is I have, my football friends and my work friends, but then I have my wrestling friends. And I find myself talking to my wrestling friends all the time through, we talk about it on the shows all the time, my group chat. And those guys look for every chance they can to go to wrestling, not just because they really want to see it in person, but they like that familial aspect. And they like that, that guy's always sitting in, row 1, seat 3 or whatever. And so that concept, I think, is not lost on either Game Changer Wrestling or Nick Gage. They are like a traveling family. So you'll see the same people at a show in Florida that you see in New Jersey, that you see in Dallas. And it's like, wait a minute, it's not just the wrestlers traveling here. It's these same fans. And I think that sort of community, for lack of a better word, is important.
And I think that like a lot of those matches, like a lot of those, GCW matches or like the crazy ass, Joey Janela, Zandig off the roof gimmick thing or any of those things, like if you were there for that or there for any of those things, I feel like it is that kind of collective we've all like experienced. We're all having this like extreme reaction shared experience thing that it doesn't probably happen in most wrestling today. If you're just in the audience, you're not going to collect. Everyone feels like their hive mind, like, my fucking God, over that sort of thing. But I think another thing about deathmatch wrestling too, I think it was Moxley who said this in the interview. And then that's kind of when I was like, oh, okay, I can get this now, is like he related it to metal, and like I'm a huge metal fan. I love, thrash metal, doom metal, that kind of stuff, the safe metal, I guess we'll say. And there's a lot of that underground of the extreme, like napalm death, for a lack of a better term. Here's like the subgenre that to most people, if they heard that, they'd be like, this isn't music, this isn't nothing, this isn't metal, or whatever. It's just like craziness, pure craziness. But, I think that deathmatch wrestling is a counterculture to wrestling, or to mainstream wrestling, of course. It is, and in a world we live in today, to 2021, there isn't a lot of counterculture, not as much as there was when we were kids growing up, and the different undergrounds and things happening. So I think that is one other thing to look at with it is like, and then now we're seeing like a guy like Moxley, who's one of the top guys. I mean, that's where he came from, and there are people that, come out of that. And in some ways that does influence the mainstream. So I kind of look at this just being a very underground niche subgenre of wrestling, and it is part of the story and as we talked about earlier, the evolution of wrestling. But at the same time, it is, it gets into other areas of like, psychological study, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about Moxley. You dropped his name a moment ago. He's one of the biggest stars in wrestling. Of course, everybody remembers he became a superstar in the WWE, but these days he's been sort of leading the pack for AEW. But, talk about humble beginnings. He made his mark in CZW and worked these hardcore matches in the Northeast, and he had his own story to tell. How was it hooking up with Moxley and just your filming experience with him behind the scenes?
I obviously, was first introduced to him in WWE, when he was Dean Ambrose and all that stuff. And so I didn't really know up until maybe he made his AEW debut that he really had this past in these death matches. And I was like, what? That's crazy. I just didn't know that. And so, I thought that he was a perfect fit for this episode because he bridges that gap, because I think a lot of fans too, a lot of wrestling fans, I think, would look at Nick Gage and say, like, why does he do, what's the end goal? It's like when you have like an indie filmmaker, and it's like a lot of non-filmmakers, think that every filmmaker's dream is to be Steven Spielberg, but that's not true. Some people want to just make their indie, low budget, crazy ass movies, and that happens all the time. And I think it's interesting for someone like Moxley, who comes from those CZW in front of 20 people, pizza cut your face off matches, and then he actually somehow translated or transitioned into the top, the actual top. And so I think that's an interesting parallel to examine in the episode, that, he has that journey and Nick has his journey, and it's a different one. But you can always tell with Moxley, which I love, is that his just he loves this shit. You know,
Yes.
he loves this CZW blood and guts and crazy. He's in one of these adrenaline junkies, as we were talking about, you know. And I think, you know, also just a few weeks ago, you know, it was announced that him and Gage are going to work a program of some kind. And wow, like that goes to show you he's not finished with this side of his story. So that's also interesting, going from, you know, you're going to the top, and now we're coming back down to the underground, you know. So, but he was awesome. You know, he was so cool to work with, so appreciative, wanted to do this for Nick, you know, and wanted to be a part of it. And I mean, he's got one of the lines of the whole season, which is, you know, the only time he fucking doesn't wear his mask is when he robs a fucking bank. You know,
it's tremendous. What a great line. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted to mention too, you said something a minute ago, Evan, about underground. Jason, how big of that do you think that is to the appeal of this sort of genre of wrestling? That this is, you know, this is underground. It's almost like when you're talking about bands. Oh, I like their indie stuff, or I liked them before they went mainstream. You know, it's like when they become Nickelback and they're the biggest band in the world. Oh, they love them and we hate them. But when they're this underground, oh, I saw them in a club in front of 80 people, then it's cool. Is that
underground Nickelback shit?
You know what I mean, though. Before they were famous type deal. I think that's a big part of deathmatch wrestling, that this isn't Monday Night Raw. This is for us, right?
Yeah. No, well, like you were saying too, it's like there is like a community there that rallies behind it like so much. And that's, you know, you'll get that with counterculture stuff and subgenres. Like you'll find that community that's there supporting it. And, you know, that's what's happening with like deathmatch. Is like you've got this like really hungry community that supports it. I think and also like what Evan was saying too, it's like to be able to say you were there, you know, for this crazy thing that like happened that you all collectively experienced at the same time. Those moments are a big deal. And again, like I saw it last night on Twitter when people were reacting to it, they were like posting their video clips of their footage of being there at the, you know, I kind of wish they came to us with that footage before we made the episode, but it was cool to see like other angles of these moments that were like in our show.
Yeah,
man, you just came up with a really good idea. I think, you know, if this train keeps going, you guys have to do something like that where it is just a series of fan cams.
That would be
cool. I love it.
That would be
because I mean, this is the I mean, one thing we haven't touched on either is this is the most contemporary story we've ever done for the show. And it's like, you know, I just on social media, it's like I can go in and like find on Twitter, you know, reactions and moments to things that have happened in this episode. That's how recent, with the David Arquette thing in particular. But like, you know, this is one of the first stories we ever covered where there would be fan angles and cams. Because normally it's you know, and that was so new for us too. And I think, you know, after making so many episodes of the show, doing something as contemporary as this was just fresh for us, and it was a challenge. And most of the stories that we cover in the show kind of have a beginning, middle, and an end. And this story doesn't really have an end, you know, yet. It's still being told, you know, and I think that's interesting for us. Like we're kind of capturing Nick Gage in this moment, you know, like here's everything that's happened up to that point, but then also like, you know, it is kind of open at the end, and it's up to Nick now. What's going to happen with Nick Gage after this episode? Not saying just, you know, because of our episode, but what's going to happen, you know, with his trajectory and his story. And I think that was also fresh and interesting for us to look at too. And yeah.
You brought up David Arquette, and he's obviously a big part of the story because it is mainstream and it's a name that people would recognize. I've had the pleasure of meeting David a few times, and we had him at a StarCast, and afterwards he sent me like a tin of cookies. He is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the professional wrestling space. What was your experience like with him, Jason?
It was cool. Like he, you know, I think, I can't remember how it went down, but you know, David originally was the one to announce our season 3 before we got the chance to do it. I can't remember how did that happen?
I could tell you. So right at the beginning of season 3 production, very beginning, this is the first episode we actually started with shooting. And I reached out to David Arquette about being in the episode, and his first reaction was, "Oh, I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm not sure." Because he's, I think, still traumatized by that match. But anyway, I think that was his kind of reaction to it, and then his documentary was coming out. You Cannot Kill David Arquette was coming right out, and so he's on the press junket tour, and then I think he was on Sam Roberts' show or something, and then he was just like, "Oh yeah, guess what? Dark Side of the Ring's doing a Nick Gage episode." We hadn't told anybody. I was like, "Aren't you in the movie business? Don't you know how this works?"
Yeah.
But yeah, he spoiled season 3 and the Nick Gage episode, but that's fine, because then that was kind of the perfect, like, okay, well, you better be in the episode now, sir.
Yeah. So
and so it worked out.
So we got him, and I could tell when he came, like when he showed up, I got this feeling from him that he was a little bit guarded. Like, I don't know if he knew what to expect from the Dark Side of the Ring guys, like, interviewing him. But I think he might have thought I was going to try to, like, expose him or something. I don't know. I just got the sense that it was a wall. But eventually, as we started talking, he started opening up more. And his, it was great to hear him explain, that death match. But even between takes, because I'm a filmmaker, I'm just super curious about some of the filmmakers he worked with. So I had to ask him about what it was like working with Wes Craven, who did Scream, and Wes Craven being one of my favorite filmmakers. And he told me this cool thing about, like, how, this is kind of side talk, but he told me about how Wes Craven got all his inspiration for shot ideas from watching anime. And
wow,
the idea, like, thinking of Wes Craven, like, in the 80s and 90s, like, trying to track down anime at that time is, I don't know, it's just kind of funny to think about. But yeah, he was cool. But at the end, he was just like, he said to me, he was just like, "Please don't make me look like a dick." I was like, "Don't worry, man." Like, because he was so genuine, and during the interview, I could, he just seemed like a really great, genuine guy. So I don't know.
And two things on that too. What you were saying is, like, going back to the proving yourself and the tough thing. I mean, here's a guy who was traumatized by the WCW title win. And I mean, and wrestling fans. I mean, we can all we've all seen how vitriolic wrestling fans can get, especially the last couple of days. but I think for him that was a real difficult thing, when that all went down, and I think a lot of people even cite that as, like, the primary reason for WCW's decline, or one of the factors. And I think for him to go and prove himself, and the self-destructiveness to prove yourself that I can do this, and then to be like, all right, let's fucking do a Nick Gage match. I mean, there's something to unpack there, for sure too. And it's like, man, you don't have to do this, but he did. And I love how Nick gives him props in the beginning of that match too, and saying that was all him, man, flying off the top rope, doing the snooker thing, and taking the punch and all that stuff. I mean, that's wild, for him to put himself in that position. The one thing I got to mention about Arquette, which I am very remiss is not in the episode, because when we were doing these interviews, I was like, this is fucking great. But a little epilogue to the Nick Gage, David Arquette saga is, so when Arquette's movie is coming out, Nick Gage gets wind of it. And he's like, well, he's using my footage, and he's got to pay me for my footage or something like that. So he calls David, and he's like, Nick's like, so I understand, I'm in your film, and it's all about the money, man. So you got to pay up or whatever, And David Arquette's like, well, we're doing a documentary, we're not really paying. This is like the story, and all this stuff. And he's explaining that, and he's like, but we're going to make it right, like, just send me your address, and, we'll make it right. And so what he does as compensation to Nick Gage for this documentary is, Nick is just like, yeah, one day out of the blue, a giant king size mattress just showed up at my house, and so It was like, what? He's like, yeah, David Arquette sent me a king size mattress. And then of course we like interviewed David Arquette about it, and he's just like, I thought it was really funny. Here's this king of the deathmatch shit, so I'm gonna send him a nice fluffy big ass mattress, you know?
That, and he thought it would be good for his back. He was like,
yeah, that's true.
From the sleep
That's
on.
true. That's true. And then, but you know, and then Nick, well, in the interview, he was like, well, you know, I already have a mattress I really like, so you know, to get it, I don't really need another mattress, but you know, if all you guys want to buy a king size I got a king size mattress if you want to buy it, and was like asking us if we want to buy it. So that mattress now is probably going to be worth a lot. So yeah, that's something you should get for the Conradison there.
I think I'm all set on Nick Gage mattresses. Chat me up about Brett.
Put all your belts on
it. Brett Lauderdale is the owner, proprietor, promoter, whatever you want to call it, of Game Changer Wrestling, and probably the real life best friend of Nick Gage. And such a big part of the story, even going back to the bank robbery.
Yes.
But before he was the promoter of GCW, which is available on Fight and everywhere else you watch events. I think there's a Nick Gage GCW event this weekend, so check that out.
That's right. Yeah.
But he was a referee with CZW, so he's there for a lot of these sort of early Nick Gage moments. What was your experience like meeting with Brett and working with Brett on this piece?
Another thing I didn't mention is, you know, when we're researching this story and, you know, looking into Brett, and then, you know, as somebody who was there for everything, like you said, you know, all the way from the beginning to being this, you know, to being his best friend in a lot of ways, and then to being his promoter and how complicated that is. And when doing the interview with Brett, I didn't really know a lot about this story going into it, but interviewing him at the end of that interview, I was just like, wow, this is another layer onto the story, which to me makes it really special, is that you have that subplot of their friendship and how complex it is, and the difficult decisions that Brett's had to make. I mean, drawing that boundary with Nick when Nick breaks into his house and when he's away, and Brett's got a newborn child, and you know, it's that kind of typical addict sort of behavior, and he's got to draw that line, and you know, he's got to be the one to, you know, push him to turn himself in, and like, you know, that whole complex friendship, I think, is another sort of relatable element to the story. And to me, which just makes it like, those are the things I'm interested in. Like, I'm interested in being able to tell those stories about people, you know, way more than I am about like the time that, you know, dude won the belt, you know, and that to me was where this story really was coming together. And Brett was awesome. I mean, you know, and yeah, just literally, like, definitely one of my favorite interviews of that during that time of making the show. I mean, and I think without him, the story would be, it'd be more fluff, you know, than not. It'd be a puff piece, you know, more so without like that relationship being on the screen.
Let's talk about another relationship that, might be a little more difficult to talk about. Jim Cornette is a staple of Dark Side of the Ring. He's all over every single episode. We just talked last week, and I said, boy, he was made for this. Like, if you're looking for a soundbite, you're looking for a television performer, you're looking for a controversial take or an eloquent response, look no further than Jim Cornette. But he's not on this episode. And as somebody who listens to his podcasts, I know that I think he commonly refers to Nick Gage as the bank robber.
Yeah.
Why was Jim Cornette out of this? Did you guys just know, don't ask Jim, he's not doing it? Or did he not want to participate? Did he tell you that? Where was Jim?
Oh, I mean, I think it goes without saying that, you know, he's not there for any of this. He's not part of the story. It just, you know, it would just be commentary of him, you know, burying all of it, which is not, you know, in the context of telling, you know, Nick's personal story, just wouldn't really, you know, it wouldn't have much relevance. You know, and I definitely remember, like, there was a time that I was going to have to tell Jim we're doing it, you know, just like, you know, just for full disclosure, like, you know, we're doing this, and he's like, oh, the bank robber, you know, just like you said. And, but, you know, I did, you know, tell him the story, because he doesn't know anything about Nick's story. He just knew, you know, just the headline of, here's the guy robbed a bank, and, you know, and then he's always like, they let a felon in the ring, you know, and it's like, he just doesn't, you know, obviously understand it, and, you know, but, But yeah, I don't know. It just didn't seem like it would have been the right move, and I don't think he would have wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I am disappointed that he said he was not going to watch it. I don't know if I believe he's not going to watch it, but
he's not.
I'm a little.
He's not.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely disappointed he's not going to watch it, even if he was going to tear it to shreds, which is fine. But like, I would hope that at this point, at this juncture, that he would trust us enough to, tell the human story, for crying out loud. And I think that like gets into one thing that the reaction to this episode being I was not expecting it to be as divisive as it has been in this community over the last couple of days. But I think it goes to show it's like it to me, it's like maybe we need to like maybe I need to spread the word about documentaries a little bit and put out some documentary recommendations to some more wrestling fans, because documentaries aren't about you don't have like we're not sycophantic filmmakers who go and make documentaries about just people we love. That's not how it works. We're not trying to indoctrinate you into the world of deathmatch wrestling. In fact, most of the deathmatch wrestling you see in this episode is undercut with extreme horror movie music because it's scary as hell, and we're terrified of it. But I think for the most part, it's like you don't have to be a fan of the... I think that's part of the wrestling bubble thing. Like, you don't have to be a fan of the person that you're watching, in order to understand that there's a story here that maybe we could relate to on some level, or be just fascinated by, and so that was kind of an eye-opening to me. Like, there's an expectation somewhere down the line that, like, we're just doing this as a fan service thing, which we're not, so I don't know. I urge anybody who doesn't want to watch this because they're not a fan of it. Like, I don't think that's, sure. I get if you're squeamish, because I was, but
you're preaching to the choir. Let me give you.
I know.
My wife Megan hates wrestling for obvious reasons. Yeah. She does not miss a dark side. She doesn't, because this is not about wrestling. This is about the human element behind it, and there's all the stories behind it. And before we veer off into, I got 3 more questions I want to ask, and I know one of them is going to be a big one, but
oh boy.
The thing I'm trying to drill down on is, what is it that's so off-putting specifically about deathmatch wrestling? And here's what I mean. Tables are widely accepted. Chairs are widely accepted. Ladders are widely accepted. They had ladder matches in Smoky Mountain. Ric Flair used thumbtacks. So cage matches are part, and cutting your forehead with a razor blade has been commonplace forever and ever. But if a piece of glass does it on your arm, well, now that's too far. But if we want to, mangle our face, that's fine. But if we're going to scratch our arm, well, that's different. Barbed wire matches go back to Jim Crockett Promotions, and there was Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard in a barbed wire match. So what is it? Just fluorescent light tubes and panes of glass? Is that where we draw the line? Like, everything else is fine, but these 2 things, that's too much. I have trouble wrapping my head around that.
I think it's the tubes, dude. No, but I also think that it's not glossy, it's not pretty, it's and it is a bunch of it's a handful of people in a farmland. It's the mud show thing. It's the mud show thing.
If it's in an arena and there's pyro and a ramp,
yes,
and there's a lighting rig, then it's fine. But if you strip those away, well, now not so much.
Well, I don't think for Jim or for anyone who's not into it, that I think they wouldn't like it either, for the most part. But I do think it goes back to that question which we talked about a little earlier, which is the question of finance. And I think I'm sure those would make an argument that Mick, was paid well for the things he did in King of the Ring, or whatever, and that somehow justifies it, when for him, that's not what it's about. It's not, if you know him, it's not, for him, it is something.
It's not a trade that anybody would take. They wouldn't say freestyle was $50,000. Hey, we're going to throw you off of some shit for $50,000. Nobody's signing up for that. Like, there's no amount of money. That's my thing, is it's like, where's the threshold? And because your money is different than someone, the whole concept is just weird to me, that there's this gross indignation about, oh, this is dirty. Dude, this has existed since the beginning of wrestling. Like, guys used to carry razors in their mouth and then pull it out and cut their face. And that's fine. But, oh boy, he went through a table. Yeah, so did Harley Race. He rolled around in thumbtacks. So did Ric Flair. Yeah, what are we doing? Like, I don't understand the where is the line? And I'm with you. I think it might be light tubes, as silly as it sounds, and some of it may just be presentation. But you go back and you hear that famous Stone Cold story about, well, I worked 7 shows for Jerry Jarrett, and then he paid me $210. Well, that's more hardcore than jumping off some shit. I don't want to drive 3,000 miles and get paid $210. And come on, man. It's hard for me to understand why everyone is so, because this is such a polarizing topic, but
it really is. Yeah. It's more, and you know what? It's more disturbing to me that this is more polarizing than when we've when we've examined stories about wrestlers who have potentially, killed people,
murdered.
Yeah. But I think that is that's just the wrestling fan bubble that the show is a part of, of course, and we love that. But I think for other viewers who are not part of that, and their fandom isn't wrapped up in into this, I think when you separate that, the story of Nick and his longtime girlfriend, we haven't talked about her either yet. And all of that, that's a compelling story, and I don't mean just to change gears, but I think at the end of the day, it is confusing and it makes no sense as to where we're drawing the line between certain things, especially in this crazy ass world.
I find it still like even when we did the Bruiser Brody episode, it was so difficult for me to watch some of those Puerto Rico matches with Brody and Abdullah the Butcher, and you see what they did to their bodies. Just look at their faces and their foreheads, like
Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah.
Like that skull, that head,
and people just say, oh, it was blood and guts, but it's not met with like this. I would never. Abdullah was on every card around the world, and so was Bruiser Brody. And so I don't know. We'll table it. Let's talk about.
It's a weird thing to take a stance on, and it reminds me of this almost kind of like what you see in we've seen recently with movies. It's like this fan gatekeeping where fans dictate what they define to be wrestling, and it's got to be that way or it's no way, and like Evan said, we're both not, big deathmatch fans, but the story is intriguing. And, and we've done, this was our, 18th, 19th episode. Like, I would like to think that if you were a fan of our show and you liked how we told these stories, that you would, step out of your comfort zone for a moment just to watch how we handle this story. Even the weird example, but even the Herb Abrams story wasn't about a wrestler. It's about a wrestling manager who's got this cocaine fueled wrestling federation. So people love that story when they gave it a chance. It wasn't a wrestler that they grew up loving or a legend that is to be celebrated. It's just an interesting character in this fascinating world, who has a complex human story. And so just give it a chance. Like it's there's not I don't know, I get it. Like when I was younger, I would be ignorant maybe to some other genres of film that people told me I should watch, I can get into, and I'd be stubborn about the kind of movies that I liked. But then I opened up my, my perspective a little bit, and I've taken inspiration.
You just don't have to be a fan. You just don't have to be a fan.
Thanks.
Yeah. you just don't have to be a fan. That's the thing. Those things aren't mutually, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, there's so many great documentaries out there. I'm not trying to say that we're a part of that echelon by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a great film about the 1965 genocide called The Act of Killing. Don't have to be a fan of the 1965 Indonesian genocide in order to watch it. It's a fascinating story. You don't have to have an action figure of the genocide. Go ahead.
We got to talk about Danzig. He's not in the episode.
Oh, Zandig. We can talk about Danzig too, though. I love Danzig.
So Zandig, what an interesting character he is. Sort of the godfather of CZW. You mentioned his big famous bump off the building with Joey Janela to put Joey on the map, but he's not in the episode, and that sort of was like, wait a minute. So I guess my question is, was he interviewed for this and just wound up on the cutting room floor? When can we see the Zandig footage?
The Zandig footage. All right. So let's segue here into the making of this episode. So this was the first episode we shot for season 3. Nick Gage was the very first interview we did for season 3. And obviously there was a global crisis, still ongoing, but I mean, we were in the throes of it at this time. And so, it was myself and our, Canadian compadres, who were traveling with me, and I think we mentioned last week's episode, we were all in an RV. There was no plane travel. We're all driving around the country, and this was our first stop, was to New Jersey. And there was a lot of anxiety, between the three of us, especially from the point of view of the Canadians, seeing how absolutely crazy things were down in the States at the time, leading up into the election and leading up into, how this country's response to the pandemic and everything. So there was a lot of anxieties, I think, amongst all of us, and this, we were learning as we were going too, in terms of all these procedures were new, all the COVID protocols were new, and we knew we were mildly in harm's way, and we had to be as safe as possible. So we did the Gage interview, and that was fantastic, and then we did Brett's interview, and that was amazing, and then Zandig was next on the list. I did not. I didn't really know who he was before this. I knew that he was, a mentor, somewhat to Nick, and that he was obviously, was a promoter of CZW at one point. So, flash forward to the day. So we're doing the interview that day. I'm getting these frantic calls from the office back in Toronto because they've been interacting with Zandig all day. And Zandig was just pontificating on the conspiracy theories of the pandemic, not willing to wear a mask when he was supposed to wear all that stuff, just like, I'm not going to comply, it's hampering my freedoms, and, and just like, and it was just like, it was worrisome to us, because we knew we were probably going to encounter this more than once on this show. And it's just like, obviously, we just want to be as safe as possible. And he wasn't willing to really do that, or was very annoyed by that. So I was like, oh, boy. And so we were feeling really uneasy about it, because we had heard all that. And it was kind of like, well, we just need like one reason to maybe not do this interview. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Front lines, war correspondents here. So we show up at his house, and we get to the house, and I don't know, man. It was like his house had like a custom skin, like a custom Trump skin, like he had so many flags and paraphernalia, and like kind of the scary militarized versions of it, like the big Trump tank with Trump standing on the tank, and and it was just like, whoa, he's all in, he's all in. And it was like, like it was a insurrectionist dream base, and so anyway, we show up, and I was just like, holy smokes, okay. This is, especially the Canadians, I think, were extra sweating, because this is, this is the embodiment of their worst fears, I think, in a lot of ways. And so we show up to his house, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go suss it out. So go in, start walking up to the house, and all of a sudden, the vibe is very strange. I forgot to mention we were 10 minutes late. 10 minutes late. We took a wrong turn in the RV, and if you take a wrong turn in an RV, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were, and this fucking thing is huge. So we're late. Show up to the house. All of a sudden, I start seeing crying children, and outside, running out of the house. And I'm like, what's going on here? And obviously, no judgments, probably some hard stuff going on, behind closed doors. I don't know. And all of a sudden, his partner, I think his wife or someone, comes out and looks me straight in the eyes and says, he's real pissed. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is gonna be a crazy time. So I get to the front of the house, and there's a sidewalk there, and I'm staring at the house with the Trump tank, and my phone starts going off, and it's back home at the base, and they're calling me saying, do not go in the house. And it's kind of like that moment in like that movie, like When a Stranger Calls, when they're like, the killer, he's in the house, And I'm like looking at this, and I'm like, do not go in the house. Repeat, do not. He does not want you in the house. Turn around, go away. And then as soon as I'm like staring at his front door with the phone on like that. He comes barreling out of the house like Chris Farley, man lived down by the river. Like he's coming out like this, like, you guys blew it. You guys blew it. And he's like, what do you think? I'm some guy from Jersey. Like, I've been waiting all day, you know, and he was right up in our face, you know, spitting the whole thing. And this is where like COVID and we're like scared and, you know, and this whole thing. And like I said, I just needed that one reason to be like, I'm not doing this, you know, and I'm drawing a line. And and as soon as I saw that, and as soon as he came out and was yelling at us, I was just like, okay, see you later. You know, I was just like, we just turned around and drove off. And we're like, where should we go, guys? All right, I guess we got to go to Walmart to, you know, like fill up some supplies. And we just see Zandig take off in his car, drive off angrily somewhere. And then we're like, all right, I guess we'll go to Walmart. And of course we go to Walmart and he's at fucking Walmart. So now we're at fucking Walmart with him, you know, and I'm just like, God damn it. Like we're both like rage Walmart shopping, you know? And so
I'm curious, why did you need, what guys, we got kicked out. Let's go to the Walmart.
Well, because
we always got
you always gotta, first off, you gotta see what figs are there. But second, you don't know, like, you know, we don't have not a lot of time to fill up on, you know, the shit you gotta fill up on for, you know, cross country trips. So we're like, well, I guess we're gonna go and buy all the food and shit now because now we have some time. And of course, he's there just like, fuck, shit, you know, and pissed at us and the whole thing and the crisis and pandemic. But it was crazy. And that was just like, wow, is this what we're in store for season 3? And you know what? I have to just say, you know, like, I know Nick was disappointed. I was disappointed because, you know, he's a big part of Nick's story. And I think that he let Nick down with that. And that to me was just kind of like, well first off, you know,
it was Jason's fault. You guys were 10 minutes late. I mean, Zandig, he didn't let anybody down. You guys let Nick down by not showing up on time. So just take
Yeah, right. Evan called me like right after. I think it was between your trip to the Walmart, and you know, explained to me the situation, and you know, again, it was like the world was a nightmare at that point. So I don't know. To me, when I heard that, I was like, yeah, just go, man. Like it sounds so.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Like I'm not. Yeah, it's just that's why, like in this show, making this season, it was like we had to be like, you know, we had to make those choices because every time we did an interview, it was a risk. And every time we did that, you know, and, you know, we're not able to do Zoom interviews, you know, and so we have to go into those places. And that was a big eye-opening experience for all of us because we were just like, you know, like, yeah, we need to make safety boundaries too. And it's not just about like, you know, getting the story, you know, or whatever. It's also like, hey, you know, we also have to like be safe. And that was just the most unsafe thing I think that's happened in the entire freaking journey was this. And yeah, it's too bad. But you know what?
Jason, a Canadian, put the word "the" in front of Walmart like he's a real. Because down here in the South, you say the Walmart just to be funny, or I do, because people in my area
Walmart
refer to it as the Walmart. And when Jason did it, I was like, boy, the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes. Chat me up, Jason, about the fire match. I had seen most of these clips. I was a low-key Deathmatch fan back in the day until I saw it in person and then was like, oh no.
You got to tell us that story too, by the way. What is this crazy, like you?
So, you know,
yeah.
I watched all the Tournament of Deaths, all the IWA and the CZW stuff back in the day, and I was a tape trader. So when that was getting all the buzz, I'm like, well, let's see what it's about. And so slowly but surely, I started to learn about these big moments, like Sexy Eddie squirting his own blood in his mouth, and it was just crazy stuff. And
I don't know what that is.
It was a spectacle. Oh, I got to send you a clip. Anyway,
no.
I was at the GCW event after Starcast in Chicago, not the first one, but I guess Starcast 3, and a performer there named G Raver got hurt really bad.
Oh, you were there for that.
And he got cut really bad. And so I'm in the back drinking beers. It's the end of a long day. And I'm like, oh man, you know, I'm in hell at those conventions. So I'm like, oh, this is so cool to finally just get to hang out with my friends and drink some beer and feeling good. And all of a sudden I see guys running around and I see my buddy Mance Warner, like, I think he has his thumb in the wound trying to get the guy outside. And I realize, wait a minute, this is like a really scary, what's happening? And so it went from, haha, you know, Jerry Lawler's a heel and this is great to, oh no, somebody's hurt for real. And instantly I was like, I don't like the way this makes me feel. So I left, donated to his GoFundMe, and said, that might be it for me in live deathmatch wrestling for a while. I can still watch it on TV, but I don't appreciate it the same way I used to because it got real for a minute. And so while it's just these fantasy larger than life characters, it's one thing, but in the context of, wait a minute, are they doing this because I bought a ticket? Because I don't want to be the guy who's, and that being said, I love GCW. I am a card carrying member of MDK. I have a metal card that says I am gang affiliated with Nick Gage. I love everything they do. Right. But in that moment, when it got real scary, I was like, I don't like this. This is not for me. And not necessarily I don't like what I'm seeing, but I don't like the way it made me feel because I didn't want somebody else to, because at that moment, people are concerned. Is this guy going to be able, is he going to live? Is he going to be able to work a normal job? How will his life look like on the other side? Now, thankfully, he's made a full recovery and he's fine. And I overreacted because I'm a little bitch. But I was in the moment at that minute. 5, 6 other lights, and I'm like, he's hurt for real. This is not cool. I don't want anyone to be hurt for real. So even a few weeks ago, when Chris Jericho took the big bump off the cage and everybody shit on it, I'm thinking, well, why are we doing it? If we're taking these big risks and these big stunts, like, and we're just going to shit on it, let's just stop.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so let's not risk anybody getting hurt for real, and let's just be entertained and tell a good story and move on. And
there's plenty of FMW y'all haven't watched yet, so just watch that, and you'll be good.
But the fire match, I had never seen that clip with a dude running around for real on fire, and I love the line about stop, drop, and roll. Chat me up on this, Jason.
Yeah, well, oh man, like there at one point that was a longer section in the piece, because right, when that happened, he got terrible burns to the point when he went home, like after the match, he went home, which is crazy, and he was sitting on his couch, and I think it was like one of those like pleather couches, and when
it was days though. He didn't do anything for days. He was
he was just sitting there on the couch, and then he got to get up, and his like skin like stuck to the couch and like peeled off like onto the couch. And his girlfriend Sandra, who was great in the episode, she was there for that. And I like how she talks about how like I can't imagine being the partner of somebody doing this kind of stuff, but how she would never like throw herself into it to see how Nick is doing or ask like, are you okay? She
didn't want to break kayfabe.
But that moment was the moment in which she was really scared, and thought he could be more hurt. And then, she had to like take care of him at home. But, we filmed the whole reenactment and everything of his like, his skin coming off his back, but it just it was already enough. It felt like in the episode, and had to get to other things. Yeah,
we just wanted to get into the story, and you have to kind of pick and choose but I think Nick has so many of those war stories, from being. I mean, he died in the ring.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. It's like this is a wild story. This is a guy who died in a match. Came back to life, and then that's just like act one, of this story. And then there's so much more. So that to me, again, just another like, wow, what a wild story. And and shout out to, to Sandra too. I mean, I think she was such a vital part of this story and I think grounds it in a way that it's like that's the secret sauce with Dark Side of the Ring in a lot of ways, is getting those family members who have such a different perspective or who can tell a real story and they're not working you, and I think that was awesome too, to have her there, even as someone who's cheered him on in the front row, and I you can see her in the matches, being kill him, fucking kill him, which is great. But also, she's there through everything because they met, way early on. I think before he actually became a wrestler, she was with him, and would go over to the Wilson brothers' house, and they'd be, slamming each other on the couches and watching wrestling and all the pay-per-views, every weekend, and that whole thing. But I think she takes all of this wild and crazy world and everything that's so out there and insane, and kind of brings it down to the ground level, which I think for us is and just being able to cut back and forth between them into the whole saga of them being kind of on the run after he robbed the bank and spending all the money in Atlantic City.
How fun was that to shoot? I mean, I feel like that scene of them, I think Nick called it balling out. That had to be fun. It was like the Herb Abrams episode again, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was fun. It's just fun to see like Nick Gage, his character like in that kind of environment, and, to see like her, his girlfriend, being part of that story, it's fascinating. It's almost like this, I don't know, like
it's a love
Bonnie
story
and Clyde sort of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Bonnie and Clyde. Great descriptor.
and yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry.
I love the show. I love the story, and I love the idea of how surreal it is. And I realize we're minimizing a crime here, and Lord knows I don't mean to, but can you imagine for a minute when we were little kids, if we're watching the news with our parents and they're saying
Arn Anderson robs a bank?
Yeah, I was going to say barbarian. I'd be like, Daddy, that's barbarian. Like, what? Can you imagine? How surreal that must feel. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but just a few weeks or months ago, whatever it is, Nick's like chief rival in Game Changer Wrestling is a wrestler named Ricky Shane Page, and he sort of reenacted the whole robbery, and not at a bank, but in a grocery store. And I mean, down to the fact, or it was a convenience store, down to the fact that this rival carried a gun into the gas station. He's wearing a blue hoodie identical to the one Nick wore. And he's like, is this what it felt like? And it was just, you took something that was real and turned it into story. And it's interesting because the guy behind the guy, like we know the reason he robbed that bank is because of his addiction.
I was going to say. Yeah.
And that's really the whole story to me of this episode with Darkseid is he did these crazy stunts because he loved wrestling and he wanted to sort of be a star. And this felt like, hey, this is a community and this is a family. And it was a support that he was looking for and he needed in his life. But in an effort to continue doing it, he needed some other support in the form of prescription painkillers that he didn't have a prescription for. Right. And it took him so far that he robbed a bank. And, and to Moxley's point, his whole gimmick is I cover my face. But when I rob a bank, I don't cover because he's just not, well, that's a character, putting on a performance. And I am so far consumed by my addiction. I have to do this. And in a weird way, this to me, and I realize this is silly and I'm rambling, but it's almost like he goes to prison and he sort of comes out of the other side clean. His addiction is no longer taking over his life like that. It's almost a weird way that, hey, maybe sometimes the system actually works because this is a success story. Recidivism is a thing with prisoners and they go back and they do the same thing, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
He comes out of this thing clean and sober and a much bigger star than when he went in. It is a success story, even if it doesn't feel like it.
Well, he does. Well, he did go back, when he first came out, he went back a short time after, but couple of things there is, I think one of the things that was important to us and one thing that came clear out of the interview was the act of desperation. This is an act of desperation to do what he did. And I think had he been firing on all cylinders, and really, I don't think, he wanted to cause mayhem by, robbing a bank. He didn't have a gun. If he had a gun, he would have been, he would definitely still be in jail. Yeah, he would still be in jail today. So, it was an act of desperation, in terms of his addictions and feeding that and being a part of that. Is it the right thing to do? No, obviously not. But, I think for him in that time, it's like, you can pick apart all those things of like, well, if he was going to rob a bank, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's like, obviously what was clear to me was, at that situation and where he was and what Brett was describing, and heroin being a part of this and spiraling, and in terms of dead, nowhere to stay, winter, what are you going to do? And in that moment, he made that choice, which obviously would forever alter his life. But I think one thing that was important to me, it's like, I don't know if it does work, because it's like he goes away, he comes back, and it's not like when you're clean and sober, you're just clean and sober now, and everything's great. You have to fight that battle every single day.
Yeah.
And and I think you can sense some worry in Brett, in that interview when we ask him about, do you think this is, is this a redemptive story? And it's still, I think you can sense that hesitation because, if somebody is an addict, especially on that level, and this is something for me, like I said, like I haven't experienced myself, but I'm trying to learn and understand more, and see that it's not just a thing that you can, I'm sober now and everything's great. No, every day it's a fight for the rest of your life, and that's the cruel reality of that situation. And and I think that is, like I said earlier, just one of the more relatable, human, universal aspects of this story. Much more so than like, light tubes, whatever. It's that, which is something I think we all know someone in our life that is, that addiction has affected. And that was, I think, that's just to me is one of the more raw, real parts of this story, is that it's not that simple, for him. But also one of the dark parts of it too, and the honest parts of it.
Very well said. I don't know what I expected, but I loved it. I was a fan of Nick Gage going in, and I was familiar with his story. And it's funny, I got to spend some time with Jeff Jarrett this week, and I said, "Hey man, you got to watch Dark Side on Nick Gage." And he sort of tilted his head, and he said, "Now Nick Gage, where did he wrestle?" And I said, "Well,
Memphis."
Right. He's thinking, "Was that a territory guy?" and I sort of had to give like the elevator speech on Nick Gage, and I said, well, he was a hardcore deathmatch wrestler who got addicted to pain pills and robbed a bank, but then he came out, became a bigger star, and stabbed David Arquette in the neck. But outside of that, he's a great guy." and everybody laughed, and it's like, I really mean everything I said was factual, but I've had the pleasure of meeting him and some folks in his circle, and he is a great guy, and I think a lot of him, and I hope to see him again soon. And I'm going to see him this weekend. GCW's got a big event. You can watch it on Fight and probably a few other places. But I like what they're doing, and I love his character. And I'm excited to see the second half of his story because, to your point, Evan, this is a contemporary subject. It's not over for him. Unfortunately, a lot of the stories you guys tell are with people who are no longer with us, or at least no longer an active ring competitor. Mm-hmm. He's working this weekend, so check him out. And be sure to check out next week. Am I right? Is next week Collision in Korea? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it is.
Yep. We're going from Nick Gage to North Korea, guys. So
we're shifting gears. Jason, what should we expect on Collision in Korea?
I think it's really fascinating. To see a bunch of tough wrestlers, guys. I really. I grew up loving and, even being afraid of, and to see them being put in a vulnerable position where they're afraid for their lives. And, this trip of WCW, going with Inoki and his crew to North Korea to perform in front of the biggest crowd there ever has been for a wrestling event, and them it's like a culture shock sort of thing where the wrestlers are used to a certain way of life. This is before the age of the internet, so they probably had no idea what life was like in North Korea. And so when they get there, things turn pretty quickly, and like I said, you see these guys become vulnerable so fast and start to turn against each other. And I think it was Scott Norton who said that for him the experience felt like it was being in a Twilight Zone episode. And so you'll see that is what we really leaned into for this episode, and it feels kind of like it's our Dark Side of the Ring Twilight Zone episode. Like even the music is inspired by music from Twilight Zone, and like just the whole vibe of it, the way we shot the reenactments.
It feels like a dream. It's like a wrestle. It's like a wrestle dream, because the whole thing feels like it never. Like, how did this happen?
Right.
It's so crazy. We're in North Korea and we're like wrestling each other. It's so weird. And that to us is like, we just wanted to really lean into the fact that this, like, it's like, whoa, we all like through the looking glass and, through the other side. And then we woke up and it's like, oh, did that really happen? And so we kind of leaned into the surreal nature of the episode. And it's got some amazing one-liners. Scott Norton's an all-star. You're going to love him. Oh, yeah. And Too Cold Scorpio, of course.
I love Too
Yeah.
Cold. You got Eric Bischoff in there, Sonny Ono in there. And do you want to tease? You have a real, wrestling royalty is in this.
Wrestling royalty is here. Yeah, we got John Zandig for the North Korea episode. He was there going nuts. No, no, we got Antonio Inoki for the episode, which was just me as a fan. I mean, God, was such a high point, for me as a fan. It was such a surreal experience interviewing him because obviously I had to do that remotely. We had a crew there in Japan that was filming it, and I was there on Zoom, doing it, and yeah, just a wild experience to be talking to Inoki for an hour and a half, about this wild trip that he put together. So yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, so Collision in Korea.
That's it, man. I mean, that's the closer. Think about that. Too Cold Scorpio, Sonny Ono, Scott Norton, on and on. But then from Eric Bischoff to Antonio Inoki, my goodness, Dark Side has Inoki. Are you kidding?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I wouldn't have guessed it in the beginning, that's for sure. Real quick before we get out of here. Before that thing, I just want to shout out a few members of our crew.
Yes.
On this Nick Gage episode in particular, because they knocked it out of the park. First, I just want to, I definitely want to just shout out Andy Appel and Dan Tamizian, who are a road crew with me in the RV. And at the front lines, on Zandig's front lawn, those guys drove up and down this country and doing this. And this was the first one we did together. And it was a wild experience. And I know that this episode means a lot to them too, because this was all new to them. And they, and I know it's one of their favorite episodes as well, but they just, they killed it. They did an amazing job. Want to shout out them. Jason, you got to shout out the post crew on this one.
Yeah, Steve Taylor, who was the editor of the episode, he absolutely killed it. He's been an absolute blessing to have on this season. He did this episode, and he's got the Ultimate Warrior episode coming up as well too.
Similar stories.
Don Cook, our story editor on the episode, he's been amazing. He absolutely immersed himself into this world, and I think I saw him just write MDK all day, every single day on our Slack. He's just
yeah. He's definitely gang affiliated.
He is, yeah. He became obsessed with it, which was great. That's all what we. It's more than we can ask for from any of our teammates, is to become obsessed with the material as much as we do. And so, yeah, thanks to those guys, big time for.
Yeah, and Steve and Don actually look like Nick Gage too. So it's great. We're only going to get people that look like the people on our shows from now on to work on that. And then real quick, last week we talked about Conrad, it's back.
Oh God.
Talked about Stone Cold Metal. I went on eBay and I bought World of Wrestling Rocks. Conrad, did you have this?
Nope, I didn't. That's a new one.
This is a CD, just so you understand. This is the beginning of my wrestling journey, everyone, because my professional career in wrestling started here. This CD, if you remember it, this is total bootleg shit. This is literally a guy with a drum machine and a guitar doing Stone Cold Steve Austin's theme song, Undertaker, Kane, New Age Outlaws. This is 1998. And of course it has...
Fun fact, it's Matt Coon who did the CD. Not really.
It could have been. That's amazing. But anyway, the genesis of this CD is my dad actually worked for the company that released this CD. And as a 11-year-old, 10-year-old wrestling fan, I was like, Dad, wrestling is really awesome. You got to do something with wrestling. So my dad, shout out to my dad, actually made this happen. So this is produced by my father, and in the track listing here you can see that the track 1 is Entering the Ring and track 6 is The Clothesline. It's actually my dad doing wrestling commentary as interstitial tracks on this. So as you're listening to a low budget version of Freak on a Leash by Korn, which is also on here, it cuts to my dad as a wrestling commentator going, oh, the clothesline, and oh my God. So we're cracking this open right now because hold on. Are you watching this?
I'm ready.
Oh my God. You can get your Pro Wrestling Magazine subscription too inside here.
I like it.
But in the credits, it says album direction, Evan Husney.
Hashtag home brag.
Yep.
Here it is, guys. This is where it all started. Get your copies here. I'm selling them, autographing them. World of Wrestling Rocks, 1998. CD can be yours. Goes real nice with the Stone Cold medal.
Are you doing a QVC spot right now? Is that what's the
where it all started?
Yeah.
Can we have my dad play us out?
Why don't we first tell everybody how we can continue the conversation? Give everybody the social handles so we can talk about Nick Gage a little more. And of course, we want to make sure that they can live tweet next week when you guys are talking to Inoki. I mean, that's a big deal. What are the handles, Jason?
We've got on Twitter, it's Dark Side of Ring, right? On Instagram, Dark Side of the Ring. Evan Husney and Jason Eisener for Instagram. Last night was awesome watching like all the fan reactions. It was probably, that in the New Jack episode, probably top in terms of the fan reaction and just seeing how people were reacting to it online. We're watching that stuff and it was amazing to watch the reaction last night. That was people seem to love it, and we really appreciate hearing what you guys think of it. So yeah. In case if you didn't catch that, just because you glitched out a little bit there, bud. But at Evan Husney, at Jason Eisener on social media, and I can't wait to see what you guys think of North Korea. It's a pretty wild story. We'll be back here to talk about it. Right? I think so. I hope so.
We'll be back here. And the one after that is gonna get everybody talking. But yeah, go buy this stupid CD, World of Wrestling. Evan Hudson's first bootleg adventure into wrestling.
My dad's first bootleg adventure into wrestling.
I had fun with you guys today. I really appreciate you humoring me. I don't know that we really accomplished everything we probably should have, but I felt like some of this conversation about Dark Side and deathmatch wrestling needed to happen. I don't really understand, it might not be for you, but there's a whole lot of wrestling that I've decided isn't for me. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that, you're a bad person if you watch it. So watch what you want and quit worrying about, what everybody online thinks. Consume what you enjoy. And if it's for you, then, that's all that matters. And we hope that Dark Side of the Ring is for you. Tune in this Thursday night on Vice, and then be sure to catch us back here next Friday. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you do not have to be a fan of North Korea to watch the episode next week. So just letting everybody know that.
Very well said. But it is a story that you have to see to believe. And I got to tell you, even though I knew it was coming, I was still shocked when Antonio Inoki was on the episode. You sent me that screen grab or that photo of him like on the camera months ago. And I thought, I can't believe this is real. And I kind of forgot it was there. So when I actually see the footage again, I'm like, like that's a big deal, guys.
It's a big deal.
It is a really huge deal. It's not just from a wrestling standpoint, but a political standpoint. And you can watch it this Thursday on Vice and tune in the next day and get the story behind the story here on Dark Side of the Podcast. We'll see you next week.